So, welcome to today's podcast. We're on part 3 here on our journey here with my good friend Alessandra Long, state attorney. And, these are hopefully been helpful for you. If you haven't listened to the first two, I highly encourage you to go back. We kind of cover some basic topics and getting into wills and trusts and sort of some of the core components. Today, what we're going to cover are two areas, one being the power of attorney and healthcare directives and living wills. And we'll go through those and get our friend here to share more details about it. But before we even logging on here, we were just chatting about it, and we were kind of equating to this is to get your sort of fire drill plan in motion right here and activate it before it happens, because some of these things are beneficial only when they're put in place beforehand. It's hard to kind of to react to them when they happen in immediate terms. So that's why we are stressing to you the importance of getting ahead of these things, taking action and responsibility so that anything that does happen that we cannot control, you and your family are prepared. So, Alessandra, I'm fired up with this. Real excited to have you back on.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you for having me. I'm glad you're fired up about it because I get fired up about it myself. And thank you for having me again. And, as you mentioned, this is such an important topic. And, these are the types of documents that can be put in place that can really alleviate a lot of stress, a lot of red tape, and a lot of difficulty if they're not in place, if somebody should need to use them. And then it becomes a whole nother set of issues. So I really appreciate you allowing me to come on and talk and educate everyone about the importance, of healthcare directives and durable powers of attorney and, blanket authorizations of medical records, which also falls under that umbrella of healthcare
Mm.
directives and living wills. So thank you.
Sure, absolutely. So let's start with the basics. Obviously, we want to define some of these things. We're trying to demystify this, so we kind of try to put this stuff in plain English for folks, and this is what's been really super helpful. So let's start with power of a durable power of attorney in that sort of area first. So what is that really, and kind of what are some of the basic aspects of power of
Sure.
attorney?
Well, power of attorney is basically, in plain language, a document that you allow another individual to act on your behalf with regards to different items, right? Different things that you normally do on a day to day basis, or intermittently or on a one time basis, but you can't do it yourself, but you're authorizing someone else to do it for you. And, there are different types of power of attorneys documents, and there's what's called a springing power of attorney, which we don't use very often because they're really not recognized in quite a few states. There's a durable power of attorney, a general durable power of attorney. And those can be in like a short form or a long form. Like a short form has like a certain number of blanket powers that you can give somebody, your agent, you call them your agent, to take care of for you. And then a long form has a lot more detail and added powers to the power of attorney, which you grant your agent to do on your behalf.
Mm.
So to just back up a little bit, I mentioned the springing power of attorney. Depending upon what state you live in, that power of attorney may be recognized as legal or it may not be. So a springing power of attorney is drafted so that it would take effect only if a certain occurrence would happen. Like
Okay.
you were in a coma or you became incapacitated, then the person can use the power of attorney. Or these other set of circumstances may have happened, or, you're, ill for a certain amount of time, that type of thing. So in the states, most of the states that I practice in, they don't recognize springing powers of attorney, but I advise everyone to consult with their attorney, depending upon what state they live in, to see if that is an option. The other, most people, not most people, but many people have also dealt with powers of attorney, like general limited power of attorney, which is used as like a one-off instance, right? So you, Tom, let's say you're going to buy a house, right? And your closing just happens to be the same week, and it has to close that week, the same week that you have a business conference that you have
Hmm.
to be at in California. Let's just say you're buying the house with your wife. Your wife can be there, but you can't be there. So you're going to give your agent, you can name your wife, you can name your attorney, you can name your best friend, whoever you want to sign on your behalf. You can have your attorney draw up a general power of attorney to then sign all the closing documents for you on that day. And that is limited to just that transaction. And then it's done. It's over, can no longer be used. Only that transaction. So the more common type of power of attorney and the type that I use in my practice most of the time are both the short form statutory power of attorney and the general durable power of attorney, more of the long form, the detailed one. And both of them are great. Both of them will give your agent the powers that they'll need to have with regards to taking care of your business matters. And so that's why I call it the business document, because it allows people to have someone else deal with your real property, your tangible personal property, your stocks, your bonds, your banking accounts, your insurance, your retirement plans, your taxes, and any kind of personal or family maintenance. That's a big umbrella, right? So the personal and family maintenance part is as simple as, you're in the hospital and you're on, ill, and you may not be unconscious, you still may be conscious, but you just can't get to, doing your taxes or, paying your rent or paying your mortgage. It will allow your agent to step in and do those things for you temporarily while you're hung up at the hospital, maybe on morphine or on some really heavy drugs that you
Hmm.
shouldn't be signing any legal anything with. So, that's super important. And in a lot of cases, the statutory short form can suffice. Under special circumstances, you may need the longer detailed one at a younger age. Let's just say if you are, a beneficiary of many trusts, or you have a lot of assets to your name, or you have, needs for gifting needs, things like that. But most of the time, the durable power of attorney, the long form, the more detailed one, which can be um, tailored to you by your attorney to incorporate whatever powers you may need that person to have in order to take care of all of your personal and business matters if you are not able to take care of them yourself.
Interesting.
Um, yeah.
So are most, you mentioned the springing one option, but like for the long versus short, are there any, state restrictions on these sorts of things, or in terms of what they you said they didn't, some states don't recognize those things. Like, why would anyone need to go into the long form if they just have some unique circumstances? Is that what I understand?
Yeah, well, I mean, the long form, a lot of times what it does is it gives you optional estate planning powers, right? So above and beyond what the short form would give you. So let's just say the optional powers could be allowing your agent to give gifts in order to avoid, you know, estate taxes, right? In some way, shape, or form. So let's just say you have been gifting to a children's trust or a family trust year after year, and you, for whatever reason, you're in the hospital or you can't do it yourself. It will allow that agent to do whatever they need to do before the end of the year to continue that practice that you have started, right? So, also it will allow your agent, I'm not saying that you have to, but you can allow your agent to create or change rights of survivorship. You can allow your agent to change a beneficiary designation. You can allow the agent to then give the power to someone else if they need to do something. So the circumstance like that would be your, like, you as an agent of someone would give the power to like the banking person to be able to do something at the bank for the individual that's indisposed at the time, right?
Okay.
So that's like another example. And then kind of easy everyday example is your power over your digital assets, like your telephone, your computer. Like if your agent, your spouse, or whoever you've named as your agent does not have your passwords and does not have access to your phone, to your computer, to any kind of data storage or user account, even if you call the company, that company is not going to give you the password or allow you to reset the password and
Right.
allow you to get in. But if you have a power of attorney that says that you can exercise all the powers of that individual over their computer, their phone, their digital device, blah, 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 then you'll have an easier time being able to access that information.
Yeah, because even in the normal day, and we talked about this before he got on here, is that we just who knows, like anything can happen to like I'm driving my wife and something happens to both of us, right? And at the same time, and we're both incapacitated and stuff happens, right? If no one's really named on this, then what happens, right? In those circumstances, like who comes in and joins? If you don't have these power of attorney sort of set up, like it causes delays, things can be missed, and how would that actually work in real
Absolutely.
life? Like what would happen?
Listen, everyone tries to negotiate a go around, right, with all these different organizations and things like that, and you might find somebody super nice that's going to break the rules and help you out, but 9 times out of 10 that's not going to happen. So it's you're out of luck, and you're out of luck until that person either gets better or should pass away and then the will takes over, or you might have to go to court to get an order from the
Mm,
court to then name you as the conservator of the person who is indisposed at the time or incapacitated at the time. And, because conservatorship proceedings are not fun, they're not cheap, and they're not quick. I mean, you can do obviously an emergency conservatorship application, but that is, I think, the last thing people would want to deal with when they're dealing with incapacity of a loved one. And, when it could simply be avoided by this one document.
yeah, it's crazy. I mean, we could easily, and I'm guilty of this as well. So anyone who's listening to this, don't obviously, we could just take things for granted that we can do these things
Yeah.
on a daily basis. We have access to everything, right? But in the quickest moment, things can change drastically. And then imagine not having access to all your funds or be able to execute things for your family, right? That's what will happen, right? Things get hung
Right.
up, and
Right.
then get delayed and even maybe cost more in the end
Yeah.
because you have
And
to go through these
yeah.
extra hurdles.
Oh, absolutely. It'll definitely cost more, a lot more. And the other thing is, if you worry, and I'm not saying that you shouldn't be worried about someone else having access to your private information, to your bank accounts, to this or that. I mean, clearly we're talking about naming agents that are trusted by you.
Hmm.
But if you even have a, issue with that, you can always execute a power of attorney and leave it with in the hands of your attorney. And so they would then have to just prove to your attorney that, oh my gosh, there's something going on with you, and they have to manage this stuff. And then they go to your attorney, who's a fiduciary that has to act in your own best interests, and then can hand over the power of attorney. So that's an option. And in New York, and again, I don't know how many states do this, the general durable power of attorney of Connecticut does not have this. But in New York, their power of attorney is very complicated and very long. It's like about 17 pages long, which is good and bad. But in that statutory power of attorney, it gives you an option to a couple of options of modifications. And one of those modifications is naming a monitor. So you can name actually somebody to monitor the agent of the power of attorney. So
Hmm.
you could name your attorney to monitor whoever you name as your agent. So they have to approve basically anything that happens, which, you know, that might make people feel more comfortable saying, okay, here I have somebody who is legally responsible, that, nothing can go awry here.
Right.
So I think that is a good option for people who, you know, they either they have to name somebody who, they're not completely close to, or they just want to make sure everybody's doing the right thing and that type of thing. So, there are ways.
Yeah, that makes sense. And, to your point, finding someone trusted, maybe to your point, you have options if you don't have anyone close to you if that you feel could fill this role, that there are options here, right?
Exactly.
But the good thing is that you have something in place that gets kind of is allowable to get in motion for your behalf to expedite things for you as needed. And so that's really the heart of this is to kind of have the response already ready
Yeah.
if needed,
Yeah, and
right?
also the
And
most important thing is if you do execute these documents, you have to tell your family that you have, and you have to tell the agents who you've named that you have these documents. And if you're not going to give them a
mm,
copy of the documents, tell them where they can be found in the case of an emergency, whether they're with your attorney, whether they're in a safe, whether they're in a safety deposit box, or whatever the case may be. So that type of thing.
no, that's super advice on a practical level, right? These are things that we should be talking about with folks in our estate plan so they know, right? And how we want things to go down, really. That's really
Yeah,
what we're trying to do is like, how would we want this handled if it did happen? And we got to certainly inform those that we've named in our estate plan so they know, right? And if they're not comfortable, then at least you have that conversation. You don't want
sure.
to have that happen when it's truly needed. So that's
Right.
really great. So,
Absolutely.
so other than that, anything else from a power of attorney perspective that you haven't shared that you think is important for folks to know?
No, I mean, I think that pretty much covers the power of attorney. I just think that it really is truly one of the most important documents to have, because I think it helps you take care of you while you're still alive. You know what I mean? So
Yep.
that
Yep.
nothing falls through the cracks. It's particularly important too, is if you have minor children. And if you are a single parent of those minor children, who's going to step in and take care of things for you if you can't? You know?
Mhm.
I mean, sometimes with spouses, some things might be in one spouse's name, the other spouse's name, or things may be joint. So it might be a little bit easier, right? But if you are a single parent, that becomes a problem when there's nobody named and somebody has to step in to, you know, take care of your minors, and they, when it comes to access to, money and different things. So,
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, no, that's a key point. So, with that in mind, so let me shift gears a little bit and we're going to go into the second part of this conversation, more focus on healthcare directives and living wills, which, there's a lot, like you were explaining, the different describers of these types of things. But, what is a healthcare directive and living will? Like, why is that important for our estate plan?
So, healthcare, like the healthcare documents are given many different names by people, right? So, some people there's like what's called an authorization for release of and disclosure of healthcare information. There's a document called a living will. There's a document called a healthcare directive. There's a healthcare proxy. And some of these are the same names for the same thing. Like the overall umbrella, a lot of people use healthcare directives, right? Like to
Mhm.
incorporate all of them, right? So, but let's just start with a simple document, which some attorneys do, not all of them do, but I like to advise my clients to sign this one-page document, which is an authorization for the release and disclosure of health information. It's basically what I call a blanket HIPAA. So, like when you go into the doctor's office and you have to sign the HIPAA forms to release your, medical records to this doctor or the other doctor, what if you're not in the condition to do that yourself? So, this document would allow whoever you name, one person, two persons, three persons, to get your medical records for you if you can't get them yourself, and get them from one provider to the other, or give the permission to a provider. So, your heart doctor to give it to your general practitioner, and, your whatever knee doctor to give it to whomever needs it. So I think that's a really great document to have. It's an easy document. You can easily scan it over to the provider and makes life easy. The other two main documents that fall under the umbrella of the healthcare directives is a living will, and I like to call it the healthcare proxy. So the healthcare proxy is basically a document that allows someone to make medical decisions for you if you can't make them yourself. It only kicks in if you can't make them yourself. If you're in a hospital bed and you're fine and you've got your facilities and the doctors want to give you a certain medication and you don't want that medication, you simply say you don't want it. But if you're not in the condition, or, have to get surgery or an operation and you're able to make those decisions on your own, well, that's for you to decide. But if you are incapacitated in a form that you cannot make those decisions for yourself, somebody needs to step in to make those decisions for you. And I bet 9 times out of 10, maybe 10 out of 10, people want to choose the person who's making that decision for them. So, a healthcare proxy, I think, is a very important document in that sense, because you really want to name the person and possibly a substitute person to make those decisions for you, and talk to, the providers and your doctors and your medical experts. The other thing is a living will. And living will are sometimes confused with a last will and testament. So a last will and testament only comes into play if you have passed and if you're deceased, right? Then the will comes into place. The living will is while you're still alive. It is a healthcare document that basically says that if there is a time that you're incapacitated and you can no longer make decisions on your own affecting your own life, you want your wishes to be, you know, whatever they are, right? And in some cases, they may be, I want you to do everything in your power to save me. Artificial respiration, resuscitation, artificial means of providing nutrition and hydration. Do anything and everything. I don't care what my condition is. I want you to do anything and everything. And then the other school of thought is, if I am permanently unconscious and in a terminal condition, and the only means of keeping me alive are life support systems that, may just serve to extend my life, but I'm in a permanent coma and a vegetative state, I don't want those things. So that's like the dire situation that nobody ever wants to talk about. Nobody wants to talk about that. And nobody wants to make that decision. And you certainly don't want to be making that decision for your loved one, whether it's your spouse, your child, your aunt, your uncle, your parent, your friend. But what this does is this helps the individual who you're naming as your agent, gives them the solace that to know what you want. What do you want if this situation should happen to you? If you are in a permanently unconscious condition, a vegetative state, a permanent coma that is irreversible, I'm telling you, I don't want to be on artificial respiration. I don't want to be on nutrition and hydration. I don't want to live like that. So if I'm telling the person close to me that I don't want that and I have it in writing, they have to respect my wishes. the doctors have to respect my wishes. And that decision isn't on them. See what I mean?
Yep. Yep.
So it's
Yeah.
a heavy decision to make when you don't have guidance. But if you have guidance, it makes it a little easier.
Yeah, and for the people who are left like in that situation when these documents are put in place and the wishes of the patient in this circumstance hasn't been outlined, like it must feel put undue pressure on the people who are there having to help make decisions. Like, what would they want? Well, you never really put this down on paper or even discussed it. And so it just makes the situation even worse,
Yeah.
right? Because it's just an awful one to imagine, right? We don't want like to think about these things, but they could happen. And, you know, obviously with the death of a loved one or circumstance like this, we have someone incapacitated, it's just already a bad situation. And it's like, okay, well, how do you relieve the stress? Well, let me put this down in writing and what I would want you to do and let you not have to worry about it, right? Or be concerned. I've already figured it out. Like, what kind of, like, to me, that's almost like a gift to the people that are having to deal with it, right? That you've given
It
them the
truly is.
guidance, right? And it's like,
Mhm.
you know, you forget about those little things. And I think about that enough because, you know, I talk to folks around this and like, this is giving your family and loved ones the confidence to not have to worry. I've got it. I've done it. I thought about it. This is what I want. Just follow it and, you know, move on
Yeah.
like from it.
Yeah. And you know what? It also leads to good family discussions. I mean, they're heavy
Mm.
topics. They're not things that anyone wants to discuss, right? I mean, if anything, everybody avoids them at all costs. But I always say that the best gift you guys can give to each other, and there's never a good time to have these conversations. Everybody's busy lives. Everybody wants to like live their life and not think that these things are ever going to happen. And I think the most important thing is to have these family conversations. And I don't mean that you have to have them like, you know, every day, but have a conversation and at least everybody talk it through as to what their feelings are and have like some sort of family meeting just so that you can all be on the same page. And it doesn't have to be heavy or hard when everybody's healthy. It's heavy and hard when people are not healthy or in a crisis.
Yeah.
So have these discussions, you know, when you're sitting by a fire on a winter night or something, when you're sitting at the dinner table and bring it up and, or say, okay, we're all getting together, one night and we are talking about this for an hour and, just sharing our feelings on the topic. So that's really what I try to encourage. And I find that, it's the best way to go about it.
Yeah, I agree. And it's, you know, these are things to your point, they can be sensitive topics, but I think the more you talk about them and sort of almost like bring it bring the sort of fear factor down, like that's why we're
Yeah,
talking about it to make it easier. And to your point, like get on the same page.
right.
To me, it feels like it just like brings down the fear factor. And now you at least setting course something that could help in the event it happens. And hopefully, to your point, it helps bond folks. Like we're on the same page as a family trying to deal with, you know, the unknown. Well, you know, would you rather deal with it then and figure it out or now? And we can do it logically in a calm way, right? And, you know,
Mm.
and come to some sort of agreement on what it should be. And at least we've got something in place. So it's really good stuff.
Yeah, I agree. And, if you have these conversations early and, clearly, and, it just takes a lot of pressure off a family. And when you have them, like the younger you have them, the better, even though most of those conversations happen when, people are getting up in age. And you may change your mind over time too. So
Hmm.
they're important discussions to have. And, life happens around you, something happens to a friend, something happens to a colleague, you know, a situation happens and you're like, oh, I don't want that to happen to me. So, you address those situations. And I think the more you talk openly and honestly with your loved ones, the easier it is.
Yeah, I agree. Just what's that sort of mantra like face the fear, like,
Yeah,
and then it becomes less scary, right?
right.
We create these fears of things. And I've gone through this even for myself in life. Like, you know, what are they? Some of them are just perceived things and made up things in our head. And then when you actually go examine them, oh, that's not as bad as I thought it was, right?
Yeah.
Or it was different than I thought it was. And so this is also kind of part of this. So Alessandra's great stuff, really good, really descriptions of these types of important documents, power of attorneys, healthcare directives, and certainly, hopefully, give people that sense that these are not these mystical things. They're very important. And certainly, folks like Alessandra can really help you kind of put these things in place. So, hopefully, this was helpful. Any last parting shots on this one? I think we've covered these two topics pretty detailedly.
Yeah, definitely. And, if I can ever help anybody, I practice in New York, Connecticut, Washington, D.C., and California. So I'm happy to help.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, thanks again. And we'll be back for some additional topics down the road here, but hopefully you enjoyed this and catch us on the next episode.
All right, great. Thank you, Tom. Thanks for having me.
Sure.
Have a great day.
Thanks for joining me on this episode today. I really am grateful for you as listeners to the Perennial Pride podcast. I hope you're getting some tremendous value out of it and hopefully pushing you along your journey to financial freedom. I put this podcast together really to help help you get more educated around your finances so that you feel empowered to live the life that you really want. And if you like the content that you heard today or watched, then I would encourage you to go to my website, perennialpride.com. There's tons of other content there. And you can access my book, Wealth Beyond the Numbers. You can buy it there on my website. It's a aggregation of a lot of great tips and tools I've learned to not only build my wealth in my accounts, but build wealth in my life and abundance and joy, and something that has a lot of my experiences in the journey that I've been on personally. Hopefully that can be also of value to you as you sort of move forward. So thanks again for being a Perennial Pride listener, and we'll see you on the next